And welcome to the surrealmist tutorial. And in this video I'm going to show you how to take an ordinary photo with water, something that looks like this, and turn it into this. And I originally got the idea for this tutorial by looking at photographs with photos that were taken with slow shutters. Now a lot of you have probably seen this type of effect done before, and it's been around for ages, where you set the camera up on a tripod and you adjust the options on the camera so it will take the shot and keep the shutter open for a long period of time, anywhere from 1 to 25 seconds, or it just depends on what type of camera you have. And so after you take the shot, sometimes you can end up with an image that looks something very similar to this. And I know we've all seen images like this, but I thought, well, how cool would that be if we had an image that did not, or where we did not have the shutter open for a long period of time, and we could actually go into Photoshop and create the same effect and create something that looks like this. Here is the same image right here. Look at, you can see these side by side. Look at the difference. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and not mess around and get started. So first thing, inside the Adobe Bridge, browse to the surrealmist folder inside the project files folder on this DVD, and you'll find some of the images right here. What I'm going to do is start off with the ocean.psd file, which is right here. So I will go ahead and double click on this. And here we go, and I'll just make this just a little bit bigger here on the screen so we can see what we're doing. And this is a great photo. It's a great photograph of, we got a little shot of the coast, and off in the distance we have a little bit of sunset going on in the left corner there. It's a beautiful shot. But if you have a photo that you would like to tweak, and I thought this would be a great photo to add that mist effect that really is just the water that we're modifying, and well, I thought this would be the perfect photo to do this with. So first thing, what I'm going to do is just a couple image adjustments to this photo to get it just like I want it before I add the mist. And so I'm going to come up here to Image, Adjustments, and select Shadow and Highlight. And the reason I'm doing this is because you can see the original, you can see the rocks are very dark. Well, I want to go ahead and brighten up those rocks. Now the rocks are the darkest areas of the image. So all we have to do is right here on the shadow highlight, for the shadow setting, we can just turn up the amount of the shadow, and look at that. That will brighten those rocks. Now the highlights, you can probably tweak that a little bit too, and that's just going to darken. If you turn this up, that's going to darken the lighter areas of the image, and that's okay. I'll go ahead and just brighten this up, and I can come back to this later on if I want to. I'm going to turn this up somewhere around here, and I can adjust the highlights here a little bit, but I probably won't get too much into this right now. I'll go ahead and click OK. Now if I zoom into this image really closely, and here's another technique. If you do have an image that has a lot of grain, you can see that this has tons of grain all over the place. Well, what we can do is just come up here to Filter and down here to Noise, and I can select Reduce Noise. And look at that, right away you can see with the setting that I last had it set at, it's applied that, and we can see this is before and this is after. So look how much smoother that is. And this sort of gives it more of like a computer generated type of effect. If that's what you're looking for, I really like that look, but not on all my images. I like it much smoother than having it really grainy. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of strength there to the grain, or to the noise reduction here, and that looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and click OK, and I'll wait for Photoshop to apply that. There we go. And I'll zoom out of the image and let's take a look. Beautiful. All right. And also, I'm going to select just the bottom portion of this image by using the selection tool, just like this. And I'll try that one more time. And then what I'll do is Edit, Copy Merged, and then up here to Edit, and down here to Paste. Now, I will be working mostly on just the bottom portion of this image. So I'm just going to cut that out and place it on its own separate layer. So what I'm going to do here is call this, I'll just call it Water Blur, because we will be blurring a few things in this image here. And I'll just call this Ocean. for the original layer right here. And I'll click back on the water blur layer, and then I'll come up here to image adjustments because I want to remove some of the color in this layer. Something like this. There we go. Something that looks like that. That way we don't have any orange mist. It's mostly like a white kind of mist. And I can just go up here to image adjustments. Also increase the brightness and just enhance the bottom portion of this just a little bit more, because I really want those rocks to stand out. Now, every image is different. You may not have to do this with your image, so I'm just going to go through here, and I'm not going to skip any steps, so you can watch exactly what I'm doing. And if you find that maybe you would like to do this to your image, go for it. But I'm just going to go ahead and just do a couple little adjustments here before I move on. So the very first part of the mist, what I like to do is blur the water first. So that's why we created this water blur layer. So what I'll do over here on the toolbar is go into quick mask mode by clicking on this button right here. And this will allow us to edit in quick mask mode. And then I'll select the brush tool. And then what I can do, or better yet, I'll just go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer, and then I'll go back to the brush tool. And we're going to want to paint with black, and it should be black on the foreground by default. But if it's not, you can press the D and X keys on the keyboard to get that to go black, and just start to paint on the water, just like this. Now be careful not to get any of the smaller rocks, or just do your best to avoid the rocks. But you can get up close to the rocks on the sides of them. That's fine, because that'll enhance the effect. But I found doing this tutorial or doing this technique that it always looks best if I blur the water first. And this is so weird. I mean, when I did this tutorial, I did things, or when I figured out this technique anyway, I did things that I've never done before, that I never thought were possible. And so I've discovered a few new things, and this could be like, kindergarten class Photoshop for some of you out there, and maybe some of you photographers out there already know about all these techniques, and that's okay. However, I'm going to show you the way, or show you my technique on how to do this, and hopefully you can pick up a few things from this. And I'm just going to go over and paint on the water, even if, I can go ahead and paint back here. And even if I don't want that, I can just erase it away later on. But I'm just going to come through here, and I've gotten around these rocks right here. Now the first time I do this, I'm just going to go really fast, because then later on I can just go back and touch up. And hopefully I don't lose my voice on this video like I did on the last one. But yeah, we should be okay. All right, I'll turn this down. Around the rocks, up and around, up and down. There we go. And I'll press the space bar on the keyboard. And when I do that, I get the hand tool. And so that will help me navigate around the image. Okay, this looks pretty good. Up here. Now I can already see there's probably some places that I don't want to blur out. Now that I'm looking at it a little bit closer here, I can get a nice large brush, and I can do a gradual blend here, erase away the back just a little bit, something like this. Let me try that one more time. There we go. And it looks pretty good. I can, let's see, I'll select, I already have the eraser, so I'll just make this smaller. And then I'll come in here a little bit closer, and you can see at the top of these rocks here that we do have a little bit of masking going on. So you can go ahead and just erase some of these areas on the top of the rocks, because we want to keep the details. And if you get a little bit of mask on there, or if you get a little blur on the rock, it's not going to make a huge difference. But, well, it it depends how much you have, but it's not going. You're still going to get a nice effect at the end. So I'm just going to go around here, and you can see there's some rocks right here. We've gotten the paint or the mask on top of these rocks, so we could probably erase away a little bit on these. You see that? See what I'm doing there? Look at that. And over here, I could make this a little bit smaller and come in here and just paint on top of these rocks, something like this. And I'll probably blur this mask later. So if you think, these little erase jobs are really noticeable, well, later on I'll show you that we're going to go ahead and just blur this mask. Look at this. Now I'll come through here, up and down. Now we've got some little rocks in here, so I'm going to lower the brush. But the main thing is just to get the mask down, and then you can come back through here and touch it up. I usually work this way. I just come through here and erase away the areas that I don't want. And looking good. Looking good. Let's go ahead and zoom out. Okay, awesome. Now, before we move on, I want to blur this mask because it's soft, but it's just not soft enough. So let's come up here to File, or I'm sorry, Filter, and down here to Blur, and over here to Gaussian Blur. And if you can see, if we add just a little bit, not a lot, but if you look very closely at, let me go ahead and just zoom in. Right above the top of this rock here, you can see if I turn up that radius, it will soften. See that? This is before, and if I turn it up, it's softer now. And that will make that blur, when we apply it, much softer. Great, let's go ahead and click OK. And I will zoom out here, and I'll scroll down. There we go. And then what we're going to want to do is switch back to standard mode at the bottom of the toolbar right here. Edit in standard mode. I'll click on that, and as soon as you do that, you're going to start to see a selection created where you masked the image, and that's okay. Come up here to select and inverse that selection. There we go. So we're just selecting the area that we want to mask now. Now come up here to Filter, Blur, and the Gaussian Blur filter right here, and then turn this up. Go pretty high with this if you want. Somewhere around 90 something, or sorry, not 90, but 9.3, 9.5. And I like that. I'll go ahead and click OK. There we go. Up here to select and deselect. All right, so it's very important that we soften the water, and we just did, because anytime you see a slow shutter effect, the water is always completely soft. There's no detail at all. Now, if we have a little bit of detail, that's okay. I'm not going to be too fussy about that for right now. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Next, what we're going to do is make another copy of this ocean layer. And so what I'll do is just click on this ocean or activate it and drag it to the new layer icon at the bottom of the layers palette. And then I'll click on that and drag it above the water blur layer. And we can turn it on. And what I'll do is double click on that, and let's call this Zoom Blur. And you'll see why I'm naming that in just a moment. Now what we're going to do is apply a zoom blur. Okay? Now the zoom blur is really going to help us create this special effect that we're looking for. It may not work on all images, but you could probably go ahead and skip this part. But for this image right here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up here to Filter, Blur, and over here to Radial Blur. And when the Radial Blur dialog comes up, right here where it says Zoom, go ahead and put a dot in that option right there. And for quality, you can leave that at good. And then what I'll do is increase the amount. And you can see that we get a little bit of a sample over here, a little demo of what this is going to look like. But we want to try to keep in mind that whatever we set this center at is where the blur is going to be. So almost look at this preview and try to get an idea and look at the perspective of it and try to match the perspective of this preview with the photo that you have. Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, but trust me, if you do that, it's going to make a huge difference. So I might have to do this a few times, but I'm just going to drag this up, and I might just be able to get away with it in the center, just like it is right there. So I'll go ahead and just increase the blur just a little bit more and click OK, and let's see how this looks. Okay, this is awesome. Now it looks like we just destroyed the image, but we didn't. It's okay. All right, let's move on to the next step. I'm going to come over here to the toolbar and select the rectangular marquee tool, and what I'm going to do is make a selection or select the bottom half of this image, but I want to make sure that I'm only selecting or creating a selection right on the sea level area right here and just selecting the rocks and the water, not necessarily the sky in the background, but just the bottom of it, just like this. And you can do this with masking if you want, but what I'll do is just turn this opacity back up to 100%, and then I'll come over here to Filter, down here to Distort, and select Twirl right here. And Twirl will allow us to create this sort of wavy effect that we want in this water. Look at this. You don't want to go too crazy because that's just not going to look good. So you just want to add a little bit of twirl. That's the whole point of this right here. And I'll zoom out so I can see this. Look at that. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and click OK. Great. And then I'll come up here to Select and Deselect. Now, if I look at this a little bit closer, we might have a little bit grain inside this blur. You see that? Well, let me come up here to Filter, Blur, or down here to Noise, and I'll select Reduce Noise and apply the Reduce Noise filter to this layer and maybe get rid of that, a little bit of that noise there. So that's nice and smooth. There we go. I'll click OK. Photoshop applies that. Perfect. I'll zoom out. And there you go. We're finished. Now we're not done yet. But we're moving on to the next step here. And we can do so many things now that we've created this swirl and this zoom effect. What I'm going to do on this zoom blur layer is create a layer mask by clicking on this button right here. And I'll go ahead and make this, or make these palettes just a little bit larger so you can see them a little bit easier there. And I'll make sure that that layer mask is activated. And then I'll come over here to the toolbar, select the brush, and let's set that foreground color to black. So I'll press the D and X keys on the keyboard to get that to go black. And with the hardness all the way down on the brush, I will turn up the master diameter a little bit higher here. Something like this. And I can erase away areas of this zoom blur that I don't want. And we can also lower the opacity of this layer as well. Look at that. Also make sure that our original ocean layer is turned on, so that is visible. There we go. And I can click on this zoom blur layer and start to erase away parts of the image. Now, a good practice is to go ahead and click on the thumbnail, activate that on that layer, and then lower the opacity just a touch so we can see the layer below it. And by doing this, we can zoom in a little bit closer and then select the brush, activate that layer mask, lower the brush, and then come in here and erase that blur away, that zoom blur there, and reveal parts of the rocks, just like this. Look at that. And I can move this around. We can come over on this side, and I'll increase the size of this brush. We could see what's over here by making that visible. And I can lower the opacity of this just a little bit more. Now we can see these other rocks, and I can just go in here and start to paint over these rocks on this mask I'll click on that mask one more time to activate it. Because, see, the rocks are not moving. It's just the water. So in order for this effect to look right, we have to mask most of the rocks. I like to leave some of the rocks unmasked so it kind of looks a little bit surreal. That's the whole point of this, is that so it looks a little bit kind of futuristic or more like a digital image or something like that, computer-generated type image. And let's see what we can do here. I can come over here and erase this away. Now, I could be totally screwing up the image. I wouldn't even know it, but I don't think I'm doing too bad here. I think it's looking pretty good. But we still got a few things to do here just yet. So I'm just getting things done by coming through here. And I like to zoom in so I can see everything really close. And there's a lot of ways to actually do this effect. But hopefully you can take some of these techniques and use them on your images, because I know that when it comes to, all images are different. So not all the things are going to work on your image that you see on this tutorial, but I try to go ahead and just create a variety of different things here. And I'm going to show you some more techniques later on that will work for almost all images. But this looks good. And this doesn't require any type of painting skills or anything like that at all, because we can clearly see where to paint. We've lowered the opacity, so all we have to do is just paint on these rocks, or erase the mask and the blur from these rocks. And since this is a layer mask, we can always go back and re-add areas that we maybe erased and we didn't want those areas erased. We can always go back and put them right back in. It's really simple to do. All we have to do is paint with white instead of black. I'm not too crazy about that. I think I might leave that one out and just get the very top of that rock there. And I'll get the top of this one. This looks like the mist is just rolling over the rocks. Or look, if I just get the top of the rock, then it might look like the rock is in the water, which it is, but we can make it look like the mist is hovering above the water a little bit. Whatever. We can just create little things here and do whatever we want. Let me go ahead and just zoom out and take a look at it. Now, obviously, we can see that we do have some lines in the twirl, so it kind of gives it away that we use that filter. And to fix that, there's a lot of things we can do to fix that. We can blur it a little bit by using the Gaussian blur. If you want to, if you're confident with that, because we've worked so hard on the masking, if you add too much blur, then you're going to go ahead and ruin the masking job that we just did. But if I add just a little bit, it should be okay. And then we can adjust the opacity of this layer and turn it down just a touch. But I can go ahead and turn it up as well. But now I'm going to show you how to add some more detail into this photo, or into the mist, into the actual mist. Let's zoom out and look at the whole thing here. Okay, this is looking pretty good. And we can see this is the original that we had before when we started, and this is after. Okay? All right. And I could probably, looks like we have some splashes over there in the background, so I can select this eraser tool, make a layer mask, and erase some of this away in the back there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is click on the topmost layer and then make a new layer on top of that. And let's call this mist streams. just made that up right now because I didn't know what to call it, but it's very similar to like a stream. So let's go ahead and over here on the toolbar, what I'll do is set this foreground to white, and I'll zoom in here a little bit closer. We almost need a little bit more room. This is kind of a wide image here. But what I'm going to do is select the brush and turn down the diameter here, and then start to paint on the bottom, something like this. Now these don't look very impressive just yet, but I'll show you what we're going to do here. You don't really have to be neat with this at all, because we're going to apply the zoom to this image, or to this mist streams layer, just like we did with the zoom blur layer. So something that looks like this. And I'll zoom out, and then same thing, I'll select the bottom portion just at the sea level right here. There we go. Or close to that anyway. I could move the arrow keys on the keyboard to move that down a little bit. Then I'll come up here to Filter, Blur, and select the radial blur. And with the good, I'll turn, good. With the zoom, I'll move this up a little bit, right about there, and let's try this out. Okay, I'm going to probably select or unselect that, because it looks like to me we're going to have to use the entire image. Let's try this. Yep, there we go. And I can apply that one more time. Okay, perfect. And then I will select the bottom portion, filter, distort, twirl. And now we have these wavy little streams here. And I'll just have to make sure that we're going in the same direction as the other waves. But these streams are a lot different. I'll show you in just a minute what we're going to do with this. I'll go ahead and click OK. And the whole idea with these white streams is that we're going to apply something. It's a filter that will create this, or create these lines in the mist. And so come up here to Filter, Other, and select Maximum right here. And we can adjust this by moving this radius value right here. You see that? And what I can do, I can come up here to zoom in a little bit. And by just adding a little bit of radius with this, you can see this is before. And by adding just a little bit, we can get those nice fine streams in that, which is really hard to get, or really hard to create in Photoshop otherwise. Look at that. It's more of like a silky kind of look. I'll go ahead and click OK. And then what I'll do is add a layer mask on this layer, because obviously there's areas that we don't want, and we can just paint black. Black is the foreground. And I'll come in here and just erase away some areas. And I think it's a little bit too bright, so we can just lower that down. And let me try that again. There we go. Look at that. Sometimes I start moving on this thing so fast that I forget to click on certain layers to make sure I'm painting on the right layer. But there we go. Let's zoom out. And it's the fine details that matter. You can see this is before, and now it looks more kind of glassy. But if we have those streams, then we can enhance that effect a little bit. Look at that. And what I also did on the original is I selected, or I made a copy of this ocean. I'll make a copy of it, and I'll call this background. I selected the top of this image here just to the water level, just almost to the sea level area there. I can go down just a little bit lower if I want to. And I flip this horizontally. Look at that. And for a final effect, I can add Mark's secret color blending layers onto this image. And so I'll show you how I create these, but you can see on the original, on the final one here, it has a different color to it. Well, that's because I have these two layers, this blue layer and this green layer, on this image over here. And so what I can do is select these two colors on this image and drag them over to this one. And look at that, and now we can get the same coloring. And this image this image over here is not as tall, so I'll need to resize these two layers. And this is just, sort of an extra little thing that you can do. And really all this is a couple of layers that are filled with color. You can see this is what they look like. And all I did was made a new layer, and I filled them in with a color. And then I applied an overlay. And then I lowered the opacity. And the same thing with the blue. And that creates this effect that you see right here. I like what it does to the sky and everything. It just looks beautiful. And we can add on this more. And I'm just going beyond the tutorial now by doing this, but I have another little building here that I made that I thought just looked awesome, so I wanted to include it. So it looks a little bit like futuristic, like this used to be land, and the water's just taking over the land. And it's washing it away because we used to have these old buildings. But now they're getting close to the water. Something like that. Check it out. And I have a line up here. I don't know what the heck that is. Oh, okay. I see that. I'll just go ahead and delete that real quick. There we go. And check it out. And we can go ahead and zoom into it. And there is your surreal mist. Now you can do the same technique on a lot of different images. Let me show you another image. Move this out of the way. Move this out of the way as well. And let's open up beach mist. Here's another image right here. Same exact thing. And you can see this is the layer that I applied. I used the mouse, or I used the brush tool, and I went in here and added some streams like this. And then I used the zoom effect, and then I waved it with the twirl filter. And I also waved the entire image. All the exact same steps. And this is the end result. And you can see this is the original. I mean, it's just, there's no, it looks like there was no slow shutter at all. It was just taken at high speed. But then we turn it into something like this. So yes, you can use this on other images as well. So have fun with that. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the next video.